Hi Jeff, I'm working on this image and I thought I'd give you a quick example of how to do the basic star manipulation in Photoshop. So we've got this is what it might look like when you first bring it in from say Lightroom or another program. You've got your nebula with the stars in one image, and you won't have this folder here, but you will have a layer called background with the little lock here. And the background layer is a layer we can't move around or manipulate. So usually the first thing I do is I click on this layer and drag it and bring it down to this little plus sign to copy it. So now we have a copy of background. And I'll also just take background and take it to the trash. And we can just rename this one background if we want, but we're going to go ahead and call it with stars for this example. And I do like to label layers just so I know what I was doing if I come back to the file later, and just so I can keep track of what I'm doing while I'm working. The only reason why we've done this is now we can drag this layer around and do whatever we want with it. But now, for the purpose of star removal, I'm going to click it and drag it and copy it one more time. Let's call this one starless. And with the starless layer selected, this would be the one we go to Filter, StarXTerminator, and remove the stars. But for the purposes of this example, I've already got one without stars in this little folder. So once you remove the stars, now you've got two layers. You've got one layer called starless, and you've got your original layer with stars. But how do you add stars back to it after you make edits to this? Well, we want one more layer, and we want that layer to be called stars. So we need to duplicate both of these. One thing you can do is click on the top one so it's selected, hold down Shift, and while you're holding Shift, click on the bottom one. And now both of them are selected. And now we can drag them both down to this plus sign. And now we've got a copy of starless and we've got a copy of with stars. So now you've got two layers, and they're just copies of your original layers. One, you've got your starless copy and your with stars. And in the same order, you want starless to be on top. And with starless selected, you'll click on this layer adjustment menu, and we're going to go down to subtract. And now you can see we have just your stars. But right now these two layers are still related. And what it is we have this layer here, which includes only the background, and this layer below it, which includes only the stars, and we're subtracting the layer which is only the background from the layer below it. And if we subtract those two, what you get are, of course, just the stars. But to make this one image, one stars image, we can select them both again. Again, I just did that Shift-click option. And we can go up to Layer, and we can go to Merge Layers. But merge layers will merge the layers that you have selected, and in this case, those two. So now we have this layer called Starless Copy, and this layer is just our stars with a black background. So let's just call that Stars. And so now we have three layers. One layer called Stars, and it just contains our stars. We've got one layer called Starless, which is just our background nebula. And we still have, as a backup here, our original image with stars. Technically, we don't need that anymore, but I usually do keep it. Sometimes I end up using it again for editing, and it's also nice to keep it as a reference. So what you could do now is make any edits you wanted to make. I'll just usually hide the star layer while I work on this image. For example, I can go over to the adjustment panel, and all of this is available through Window here. And I can create a curves layer. And say I want to darken the background there, adjust the contrast there, just the brightness there, and say I want to make a saturation adjustment. We've got a hue saturation adjustment layer there. I can increase the saturation, make the nebula brighter. So say we've made all of our adjustments and we want to put the stars back in. Well, we've got our stars layer here, and I'll turn this back on and I'll click on the stars layer to select it. So now to put the stars back in the image, all we have to do is adjust this blending mode. And usually the easy one when you take this approach is to just choose screen. So we've got our stars layer that we created earlier on, and now it's set to screen. And as you can see, it puts the stars back in quite nicely, quite comparably to what they originally looked like. And you can just turn those stars on and off. I can turn them off and I can come back here and I can continue making adjustments to this image, the original nebula image. And as long as I keep stars above it, I'm good. The other trick you can do is you can create an adjustment layer just for your stars. So say I want to adjust curves on the stars. I can create another curves adjustment layer. Now one thing to point out is this curves adjustment layer affects the whole image. But I can right-click on this curves adjustment layer and choose Create Clipping Mask. And now you'll see that this curves adjustment layer has a little arrow that points to stars. Now the adjustments I make to this curves adjustment layer impact only my stars. So say I wanted to make them a little bit smaller. I can make a few little adjustments just like that. And as you can see, the adjustments I'm making are very directly impacting only the stars. And you want to be a bit careful with this because, you know, whatever adjustments you want to make, you want to kind of preserve this smooth transition in the stars. That's why I usually zoom in when I do this. So now you've got your curves adjustment layer for your stars, and you can turn your adjustment layer on and off. You can come back here and change it anytime you want. To do that, you just click on this little symbol right here for the adjustment layer, and that'll bring up this properties panel, and you can make changes later. You can also just select your stars layer directly and go to any of these filters or image adjustments and just edit that layer directly. You don't actually have to use these adjustment properties. I just use these because, kind of like Lightroom, you can come back and change these anytime you like. You know, I can come back here and say, I think I was a bit too harsh with that adjustment, and make my stars a little bit brighter again. And the other thing you can do with these adjustments is, say you like this adjustment, but you just want to make it, you know, a little bit less strongly applied. You can select this curves adjustment layer and change your opacity. So say I've only want 50% of that adjustment, or I only want 20% of that adjustment. So you can scale it that way. But that's it in a nutshell. Now, like what I'll do is I'll create a folder here called stars, and I'll put all of my stars adjustment layers in this folder. You open and close it, just to keep things organized. And now I can turn my stars on and off with all the adjustments I've made to my stars. And I can come back down here again and continue making, you know, whatever adjustments I want to make to my nebula. So kind of like Lightroom, I can just hop and jump around and go back and backtrack and change anything without losing my progress. And I can work on my stars, I can work on my nebula, back and forth. And it just simplifies the whole process.